Every moment of your life is a negotiation, whether you realize it or not. Human beings are wired for influence. We trade needs, emotions, and power long before we trade money or contracts. From childhood onward, the brain learns one truth. Those who understand human behavior shape the outcomes, and those who don't are shaped by them. Negotiation is not a business tactic. It is a psychological survival mechanism. The mind is constantly scanning for leverage, trust cues, dominance signals, and emotional patterns. People think they make rational choices, but the truth is simpler and far more profound. We respond to confidence, clarity, and certainty, even when we can't explain why. This audiobook breaks open the psychology behind that influence, the silent biases, the emotional triggers, the way a single sentence, tone shift, or moment of controlled stillness can redirect an entire conversation. Because negotiation isn't about being clever, it's about being conscious. It's about seeing the architecture beneath human interaction and learning to move through it with intent instead of instinct. Tim Castle's The Art of Negotiation reveals something essential. People don't follow the best ideas. They follow the person who communicates with the most conviction. When you learn to manage your own fears, read the emotions of others, and speak with strategic clarity, you stop competing for opportunities and start commanding them. This is not just a skill set. It is a psychological transformation, a rewiring of how you think, how you listen, and how you respond under pressure. Master this, and every conversation, every deal, every relationship becomes a controlled environment instead of a chaotic one. Welcome to the psychology of influence. Welcome to the art of negotiation. Chapter 1. The Foundations of Persuasion. Negotiation begins in the mind long before it begins in the room. Most people imagine negotiation as a verbal contest, arguments, counters, offers, and tactics. But the true foundation of persuasion is far more psychological. It is shaped by perception, emotional intelligence, and the meaning you bring into the conversation before a single sentence is spoken. At its core, negotiation is not conflict. It is co-creation. Two individuals trying to construct an outcome that serves their deeper needs, fears, and motivations. And when you understand negotiation through this lens, everything changes. You stop trying to win the moment and start aiming to shape the entire interaction. Perception is the first battleground. Humans make rapid judgments, assessments of confidence, credibility, warmth, and intent in fractions of a second. These impressions determine how every message that follows will be received. Your tone, posture, pace, and presence act as unspoken signals that tell the other person whether to trust you, resist you, or lean in to the conversation. This is why mindset outweighs tactics. Tactics operate on the surface. Mindset dictates every subtle cue you send. A fearful negotiator speaks from defensiveness. A confident negotiator speaks with clarity and grounded intention. Your mindset influences your breathing, your timing, and the emotional atmosphere you project. And neuroscience supports this. When you enter a negotiation with a calm, regulated nervous system, your prefrontal cortex stays online, keeping you rational, strategic, and composed. If you enter in survival mode, emotional reactivity takes over, and the negotiation becomes a fight instead of a collaboration. A powerful mindset reframes negotiation as problem-solving, not pressure, influence, not force, understanding, not aggression. When you hold this perspective, You create psychological safety, and psychological safety is what opens the door for real agreement. To anchor this mindset, you must understand the key psychological principles that drive human behavior during negotiations. The first is reciprocity. People feel compelled to return value when value is given. A small concession, a thoughtful clarification, or a moment of genuine empathy establishes a sense of goodwill that strengthens cooperation. Reciprocity softens resistance. It reminds the other person that you are not there to dominate, but to collaborate. The second is scarcity. People assign higher value to what feels rare, exclusive, or time-sensitive. Scarcity shapes urgency. It also shapes appreciation. In negotiation, the way you frame your offer, the uniqueness of what you provide, the consequences of delay, the opportunity that might not come again, can shift how seriously the other side evaluates the deal. Scarcity is not manipulation. It is a psychological cue that affects how humans prioritize decisions. The third principle is anchoring. Anchoring is the mind's tendency to rely heavily on the first meaningful piece of information presented. In negotiation, the first number, the first term, or the first interpretation becomes the reference point for everything that follows. Even skilled, rational thinkers are influenced by anchors because the brain uses them to reduce cognitive load. When you set the anchor, you shape the boundaries of the entire discussion. When you allow someone else to anchor first, you risk negotiating within their frame instead of your own. These principles, reciprocity, scarcity, and anchoring, operate silently beneath every conversation. They pull emotional levers, influence expectations, and direct decision-making. Understanding them is not enough. You must learn to apply them with balance, respect, and strategic timing. Foundational persuasion is not about verbal tricks. It is about shaping perception through mindset, presence, and psychological clarity. When you enter a negotiation grounded, intentional, and aware of the forces guiding human behavior, you no longer chase influence, you embody it. And this is where true negotiation mastery begins. Chapter 2: Building Trust and Rapport. Trust is the emotional currency of every negotiation. It is invisible, but it determines the entire architecture of the conversation. When trust is present, even difficult discussions feel possible. When trust is absent, even simple agreements become a struggle. Before any numbers are exchanged, before any terms are proposed, trust sets the emotional tone that either opens or closes the door to influence. Humans are not persuaded by logic first. They are persuaded by safety. The nervous system constantly scans for cues, tone, posture, consistency, searching for signs of threat or reassurance. If someone feels judged, rushed, or manipulated, their defenses rise. But when they feel understood, seen, and respected, their mind becomes flexible, their reasoning expands, and their willingness to collaborate increases dramatically. That is why rapport is not a technique. It is an emotional alignment, a shared rhythm between two minds. It emerges when you create a space where the other person feels valued, not managed. Understanding this begins with one of the most powerful skills in negotiation: active listening. Active listening is not simply hearing words. It is interpreting meaning, acknowledging emotions, and signaling that you are fully present. Most people listen to reply. A skilled negotiator listens to reveal. You listen for concerns hidden beneath confidence. You listen for hesitation behind bold statements. You listen for what is said and you listen even more carefully for what is not. When the other person feels truly heard, they naturally lower their guard. Their body relaxes. Their communication becomes clearer. Their willingness to share information increases. Information is leverage, and trust is what unlocks it. Mirroring is another subtle yet powerful tool. It works because humans are neurologically wired for synchrony. When someone mirrors your tone, energy, or phrasing, gently and respectfully, your brain perceives them as familiar and safe. This activates the social bonding regions of the brain, creating a sense of connection that is hard to replicate with logic alone. But mirroring must be invisible. It should never feel mechanical or deliberate. You are not copying. You are aligning. You are matching tempo, meeting energy, adjusting your presence to create harmony. When done well, mirroring communicates, "I understand you. I move with you. We are not opponents. We are collaborators." Empathy takes rapport even deeper. Empathy is not agreement. It is recognition. It tells the other person, "I see your perspective even if mine is different." Empathy reduces resistance because it makes people feel psychologically safe to express what they truly want, and real needs are easier to negotiate than concealed ones. Modern behavioral science shows that the brain responds to empathy with increased oxytocin and reduced cortisol. Stress decreases, trust increases, decision-making becomes clearer. This physiological shift is what transforms negotiation from a contest into a conversation. The final piece of building trust is framing your ask in the other person's terms. Most negotiations fail because the request is presented from one side's point of view. But humans are naturally self-referential. They evaluate everything through the lens of their goals, fears, and desired outcomes. When you frame your ask in their language, when you show how your proposal aligns with their motivations, resistance fades. You are no longer trying to convince them to move toward your desires. You are showing them how your solution supports theirs. This is not persuasion through pressure. It is persuasion through alignment. Framing requires curiosity. You must ask the right questions. You must understand their constraints, ambitions, incentives, and pressures. You must see the negotiation from where they stand. When you speak their language, you speak to their internal logic. And when you speak to their internal logic, you speak directly to the part of them that decides. Real trust is earned slowly, but can be lost quickly. It is reinforced through consistency, your words matching your actions, your intentions matching your behavior. Every interaction, every tone shift, every response either deposits or withdraws from the emotional bank of rapport. In the end, trust and rapport do not guarantee agreement. But without them, agreement is nearly impossible. They transform the negotiation from a battlefield into a bridge where two people meet, not as opponents, but as partners searching for a mutually beneficial path. Master trust, and you master the emotional landscape of persuasion. Master rapport, and you master the human being across the table. Chapter 3. Strategic Preparation. Planning your approach. Preparation is the silent advantage of every elite negotiator. Long before they speak, long before they enter the room or join the call, they have already shaped the outcome through clarity, research, and strategic foresight. Negotiation is not won in the moment. It is won in the preparation. The conversation simply reveals the work that was done beforehand. Preparation begins with defining your goals. Not vague hopes, not loose wishes, but concrete outcomes. A skilled negotiator knows exactly what they want, why they want it, and how it aligns with their broader objectives. This clarity brings confidence, and confidence shapes presence. When your mind is anchored to a clear target, your communication becomes precise, calm, and intentional. Next comes your walkaway point. This is the boundary that protects your interests. It is not emotional, it is strategic. Your walkaway point represents the moment where the deal no longer serves you, where accepting it would damage your long-term leverage or compromise your core values. Most people lose negotiations not because the other side was stronger, but because they never defined their walkaway line. Without a boundary, pressure becomes persuasion. With a boundary, persuasion becomes partnership. Between your ideal outcome and your walkaway point lies your negotiation zone. This zone is the flexible terrain where agreements are found. It is not fixed, it is dynamic, shaped by new information, evolving interests, and emotional intelligence. Your zone is where creativity matters, where you stretch possibilities, reframe conditions, and uncover hidden value. Elite negotiators also understand the importance of research. They study not just the numbers, but the people behind the numbers. They seek to understand the interests driving the other side, their incentives, their pressures, their fears, and their ambitions. To negotiate effectively, you must know what the other person truly values, not what they claim to value. Often, the most powerful information is not financial, but psychological. Power dynamics also play a crucial role. Power is not dominance. Power is the availability of alternatives. When one side has more options, they naturally hold stronger leverage. This is why preparation requires assessing your options honestly and expanding them strategically. If you rely solely on one potential deal, your leverage fades. But if you cultivate alternatives, suppliers, partners, timelines, offers, your confidence grows and your presence becomes unshakable. Understanding leverage requires studying the context. What constraints does the other party face? What outcomes matter most to them? Where can you relieve their pressure while strengthening your own position? Leverage is rarely loud. It is often quiet, built on insights others overlook. One of the most underrated steps in preparation is scenario planning. Elite negotiators rehearse the conversation in their mind long before it happens. They think through best-case and worst-case possibilities. They anticipate objections. They craft responses that are calm, grounded, and aligned with their goals. This reduces reactive decision-making during the negotiation and increases composure, one of the strongest forms of influence. No preparation is complete without a fallback plan. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a source of strength. A fallback plan gives you psychological stability, financial protection, and strategic clarity. When you know you have another viable path forward, you negotiate from a place of security rather than fear. Fear narrows your thinking. Security expands it. A fallback plan is the emotional armor that keeps you rational under pressure. Preparation also includes crafting your narrative, the story behind your ask. Humans respond to structure and meaning. When your request is presented with coherence and purpose, it becomes easier to support. Your narrative should connect your goals to a shared benefit, showing how the proposed agreement elevates both sides. Finally, elite negotiators prepare their internal state. Mindset is not motivation. It is discipline. It is the ability to stay grounded, regardless of tension, delays, or pushback. A calm mind interprets information accurately. A reactive mind misreads everything. The negotiation is not just you against the other person, it is you against your own impulses. Preparation is the architecture of persuasion. It shapes your confidence, your choices, your tone, and your outcomes. When you walk into a negotiation fully prepared, you don't chase agreement, you create it. Chapter 4: Tactical Moves, Opening, Anchors, and Offers. The beginning of a negotiation is not small talk. It is architecture. It is the moment where tone, direction, and psychological gravity are established. If preparation is the blueprint, the opening is the foundation poured into place. A powerful opening starts with presence. Calm, confident, deliberate. People don't respond to nerves, they respond to certainty. Elite negotiators enter the conversation with a centered posture, a measured tone, and an unspoken message. I'm here to collaborate, not to fight. This combination of confidence and warmth shifts the entire dynamic. It lowers defenses. It signals maturity. It sets the stage for influence. Rather than diving straight into demands, skilled negotiators frame the discussion. They define what success looks like for both sides. A strong opening sounds like clarity. Here's what I'm hoping we can achieve today, and I'd love to hear what matters most on your side. This creates mutual purpose, one of the most powerful psychological triggers in human communication. Once mutual purpose is established, resistance softens and engagement rises. But after the tone is set, one of the most strategic tools comes into play: anchoring. Anchoring is the art of placing the first number on the table, a number that creates a psychological benchmark for the rest of the negotiation. Anchors work because human beings are wired to rely heavily on the first piece of information they receive, even if it's arbitrary. This is why the opening price in a market, a salary discussion, or a business deal shapes the rest of the conversation so dramatically. Elite negotiators understand that the first number is not just a figure, it is an influence device. A strong anchor expands your advantage. A weak anchor shrinks it, but anchoring must be handled with precision. An anchor that is too aggressive can break trust and signal rigidity. An anchor that is too soft reveals insecurity and leaves value on the table. The right anchor is ambitious, defensible, and aligned with your preparation. Once the anchor is placed, the conversation begins to take shape. This is where the art of the offer emerges. Good offers balance logic and emotion. They protect your interests while appearing generous and reasonable. A well-crafted offer does not sound like a demand. It sounds like a solution. It shows thoughtfulness. It demonstrates that you've considered the other party's needs. People accept offers not because they are perfect, but because they feel considered. The key is structuring offers in layers. The first layer is your primary proposal, the ideal scenario that aligns with your goals. The second layer contains optional paths that still benefit you but provide flexibility. These alternatives make you appear collaborative while keeping every outcome within your acceptable range. Choice increases comfort. Comfort increases agreement. Then comes the dance most people misunderstand: concessions. Concessions should never be gifts. They should be trades. Each concession should be meaningful enough to show cooperation, but measured enough to maintain leverage. When you give something, you must receive something: information, a timeline, a commitment, or a reciprocal adjustment. The biggest mistake people make is giving too quickly or too emotionally. Concessions given under pressure are viewed as weakness. Concessions given strategically are viewed as partnership. The timing matters. The sequence matters. If you concede early, you lose structure. If you concede reactively, you lose power. But if you concede slowly, deliberately, and with intention, you gain credibility. A tactical concession sounds like, I can move closer to that number if we can lock in the delivery schedule, or I'm willing to adjust this condition, provided we finalize the long-term commitment. This reinforces the golden rule: never concede without advancing the negotiation. Throughout this process, the emotional landscape must be monitored carefully. Negotiation is not linear. It pulses, it rises and falls. There are moments of tension, moments of silence, and moments of breakthrough. A skilled negotiator reads the rhythm and adjusts their pacing, using pauses as power, using questions as guidance, and using confidence as a steady force. When opening strong, anchoring wisely, crafting meaningful offers, and trading concessions strategically, the negotiation begins to bend in your direction. The other party feels the balance. You are firm but respectful, ambitious but reasonable, confident but cooperative. This is the blend that turns conversations into agreements. Tactical moves are not tricks. They are signals. Signals that you are prepared. Signals that you are intentional. Signals that you understand the dance between influence and collaboration. And in negotiation, the person who shapes the early structure often shapes the final outcome. Chapter 5. Influence in Action. Persuading without pressure. Influence is not force. It is not pressure, manipulation, or clever tricks. True influence is the ability to guide someone's attention, shape their understanding, and lead them toward a conclusion that feels like their own. When persuasion is done right, the other person doesn't feel pushed. They feel aligned. They feel understood. They feel that the decision benefits them as much as it benefits you. This is where negotiation transforms from a transaction into a collaboration. The first step is framing. Framing is the skill of presenting your idea not as a demand, but as an advantage. People resist pressure, but they are drawn to benefits. When you frame your proposal around what they gain, resistance dissolves. Instead of saying, I need you to approve this, you shift the frame to, here's how this move positions us both for a stronger outcome. It's subtle, but subtlety is the heartbeat of influence. Framing works because humans instinctively evaluate ideas based on what they stand to lose or gain. Elite negotiators understand this and speak the language of value, not pressure. They highlight improvements, efficiencies, protections, opportunities. They show how the decision supports the other party's interests, goals, and long-term vision. This transforms persuasion from convincing someone into helping them see what already serves them. But sometimes, facts aren't enough. Logic can win minds, but stories win hearts. Storytelling is one of the oldest tools of influence because it bypasses resistance and speaks directly to emotion. A well-crafted story creates imagery, tension, and relatability. It allows the listener to see themselves inside the situation. Suddenly, the concept isn't theoretical. It becomes personal. A persuasive story can be simple: a past victory, a cautionary tale, a relatable struggle, or an example of someone in a similar situation achieving success. Stories make your value feel real. They transform numbers into outcomes and proposals into possibilities. The best negotiators weave small stories through conversation like threads of clarity, not to manipulate, but to illuminate. At the core of this chapter lies the principle of mutual gain. Modern negotiation is not a battle. The era of win/lose dominance is outdated and inefficient. The most powerful deals are built on alignment, when both sides walk away stronger than they arrived. To create mutual gain, you must practice what psychologists call perspective integration, deeply understanding not just what the other side wants, but why they want it. When you uncover their motivations, fears, pressures, and desired outcomes, you unlock the ability to craft solutions that satisfy both parties. Mutual gain is not compromise. Compromise is when each side gives something up. Mutual gain is when each side gets more than they expected, because the solution is designed intelligently, not negotiated begrudgingly. This is the real art of influence, helping someone win in a way that helps you win too. Of course, no conversation flows perfectly. Objections will rise, they always do, but objections aren't roadblocks, they are invitations. Each objection is information, a signal of uncertainty, or a request for clarity. The worst thing you can do is react defensively. The best thing you can do is lean in with curiosity. A skilled negotiator treats objections like doorways. What part feels unclear? Tell me more about your concern. What would make this feel like a better fit? These soft, open-ended questions de-escalate fear and reopen the conversation. When you respond with calm understanding rather than tension, the dynamic shifts. Objections lose their power. The other person no longer feels they need to defend themselves. Instead, they begin revealing their inner concerns, and that information becomes leverage for building a stronger solution. Redirection is the final skill, taking the energy of the objection and guiding it back toward the core value of the proposal. It isn't confrontation, it's gentle guidance. I hear your concern about the timeline. Here's how this approach actually reduces risk and gives you more control. This method blends validation with forward momentum, acknowledging the objection while steering the conversation toward cooperation. Influence without pressure is an advanced skill, but it's the most sustainable form of negotiation. It builds trust instead of fear. It builds long-term partners instead of short-term victories. And it turns your voice into a steady instrument of clarity, confidence, and inspiration. At this level, persuasion is no longer about winning the moment. It's about shaping the story. It's about leading the conversation without ever raising your voice. It's about creating an environment where the other person sees your proposal not as a compromise, but as the obvious next step. That is influence in action. Chapter 6. Handling Conflict and Resistance. Conflict is not a sign that a negotiation is failing. It is a sign that the conversation is becoming real. Resistance appears the moment someone feels uncertain, threatened, uninformed, or unconvinced. This is normal. This is human. And elite negotiators don't fear resistance. They prepare for it. Because they understand that behind every hard no, behind every tense silence, behind every spike of emotion, there is information waiting to be uncovered. The first principle is acceptance. Resistance is not personal. It's protective. People push back because they are guarding their interests, identity, or sense of control. When you stop interpreting resistance as an attack, you stop reacting emotionally. You start responding strategically. You create space, and space is where tension dissolves. One of the most powerful tools in conflict is the pause. The pause interrupts emotional escalation. It resets the nervous system. It shows the other person that you are not rushing to defend, retaliate, or overpower. A well-timed pause communicates maturity. It invites the other party to reflect rather than react. In negotiation, silence is not empty. It is influence. After the pause comes the probe. Probing is the art of uncovering what's beneath the surface objection. People rarely express their true concern immediately. They give you the symptom, not the cause. A price objection may actually be a trust issue. A timeline objection may actually be fear of responsibility. A firm no may simply mean, I don't have enough clarity to say yes. Probing allows you to reach the truth with calm, precise curiosity. What's your hesitation? What part doesn't sit right with you? What would make this feel safer or more aligned for you? These questions de-escalate defensiveness and reveal the real obstacle. Once the truth emerges, the pivot begins. Pivoting is the skill of redirecting tension toward collaboration. It involves acknowledging the concern openly, validating the emotion behind it, and reframing the issue in a way that restores movement. Validation is essential. People relax when they feel understood. They open up when they feel heard. Pivoting turns conflict from a wall into a doorway, but there are moments when you must decide whether to push or pause. Pushing too hard creates resistance. Pausing too often creates stagnation. The balance lies in reading emotional cues. Tone changes, breath shifts, the speed of responses, micro-expressions, and patterns of hesitation. When you sense someone is overwhelmed, pausing is strategic. When you sense someone is stalling, pushing becomes necessary. Not aggressively, but assertively. A confident reminder of value, a clear statement of direction, a reframing of urgency. Elite negotiators maintain momentum without creating pressure. At some point, every negotiator will face a firm no. Most people interpret it as the end, but professionals know no often means not yet, not like this, or not until I feel safer. Your job is not to bulldoze through the no, but to transform it. And transformation begins with perspective. You shift no into how. How could we make this workable? How would this need to look for you to feel confident? How do we bridge the gap in a way that respects both our interests? These questions don't challenge the person, they challenge the problem. Other times, the path leads to yes later. A delayed yes is still a win, because negotiation is rarely about speed. It's about alignment, planting seeds, building trust, leaving the door open. Some agreements require multiple conversations, additional clarity, or a change in timing. When you respect the process instead of forcing the outcome, you preserve the relationship, and relationships are where long-term deals are born. The most refined skill in handling conflict is emotional neutrality. When you stop taking resistance personally, you stop bleeding power. You remain steady. You keep your voice calm, your posture relaxed, your words measured. People trust those who stay composed under pressure. Composure is a form of quiet authority. Conflict handled with clarity becomes connection. Resistance addressed with curiosity becomes understanding. A no transformed with patience becomes possibility. And every moment of tension becomes a proving ground for your emotional intelligence. This is where negotiation becomes more than tactics. It becomes a practice of self-control, awareness, and presence. Because the person who can hold steady when everything feels unstable is the person who ultimately leads the conversation. Handling conflict is not about defeating resistance. It's about guiding it, shaping it, using it as a signal, not a setback. Every objection is a compass. Every pause is an opportunity. Every moment of discomfort is a doorway to deeper influence. This is the art of navigating resistance with precision and turning conflict into cooperation. Chapter 7. Long-Term Negotiation Mastery. Negotiation mastery isn't built in a single deal. It's built in the space between deals. The reflection, the repetition, the refining of your instinct until influence becomes part of who you are. In this final chapter, we shift from tactics to legacy, because negotiation, at its highest level, is not a tool you pull out when needed. It's a lens you live through. A way of thinking that shapes every choice, every opportunity, every relationship. Long-term mastery begins with understanding that negotiation is fundamentally relational, not transactional. Deals may end, but relationships echo forward. Your reputation becomes leverage, your consistency becomes credibility, and your track record becomes silent influence before you even speak. People negotiate differently with someone they trust, and they negotiate very differently with someone they fear, admire, rely on, or respect. This means every interaction contributes to your future power. How you speak, how you listen, how you handle conflict, how you treat people when you don't need anything from them. These moments determine whether you enter a future negotiation with advantage or disadvantage. Power accumulates, or it erodes. The strongest leverage isn't money or authority, it's reputation. A reputation for fairness, clarity, and strength gives you the ability to enter a negotiation with gravity. People take your words seriously. They are less likely to test your boundaries. They assume competence before you prove it. This is how long-term negotiators win before the conversation begins. But reputation is only one pillar of sustained leverage. Relationships shape the others. You build these through shared wins, earned trust, and consistent value. When people view you as someone who creates opportunities, not conflict, doors open without effort. You begin receiving invitations instead of chasing them. Negotiation becomes smoother because your name carries weight. And then there is value, the most concrete leverage of all. If your skills, insights, or contributions significantly improve someone else's results, they negotiate with reverence. Value changes dynamics. The more value you can provide, in competence, clarity, solutions, or strategy, the stronger your position becomes across years, not days. Long-term mastery is also about negotiating for your future, your salary, your partnerships, your creative agreements, your leadership roles. Each is shaped by your ability to articulate worth and navigate complexity. But the truly skilled negotiator looks beyond immediate gain. They understand trajectory. They ask, how does this decision ripple forward? What doors does it open? What patterns does it set? What does this agreement say about who I'm becoming? People who negotiate short-term wins often lose in the long run. People who negotiate long-term alignment build careers, businesses, and legacies. To develop this level of thinking, continuous learning becomes non-negotiable. Every conversation is data. Every objection is insight. Every conflict is a mirror. Master negotiators examine their conversations the way athletes review game footage. They identify the moments where emotions surged, where clarity slipped, where assumptions clouded judgment. And they refine. They study psychology, communication, incentives, and human behavior. They learn how industries shift, how markets influence power, how timing shapes outcomes. They collect tools, they sharpen instincts, they build an internal library of approaches they can draw from instantly. Negotiation mastery is not about perfection, it's about evolution. It's about showing up to each conversation slightly better than the last, more grounded, more perceptive, more strategic. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop merely negotiating deals. You negotiate your life. You negotiate habits, choices, opportunities, and boundaries. You negotiate how you show up in the world and what you accept from it. The confident negotiator doesn't wait for ideal conditions. They create conditions. They advocate for themselves. They recognize their value. They shape outcomes through intention rather than hope. This is where negotiation merges with identity. You become someone who doesn't shrink from complexity, but rises to meet it. Someone who doesn't avoid uncomfortable conversations, but directs them. Someone who doesn't fear no, but knows how to convert it into clarity. In the long arc of mastery, negotiation becomes less about winning and more about shaping reality with steadiness, intelligence, and emotional discipline. This is the legacy of a true negotiator, a life built not by force, but by insight, not by luck, but by precision, not by chance, but by choice.